The joy of healthy living. I pray that you'll be able to experience the joy that you can have when you are going to be healthy and happy. I don't think you're going to be joyful if you're going to have a headache, if you're going to have malaria, if you're going to be crippled. Of course, also it's a matter of attitude, even if you have those deficiencies. But really, what better way to have it when you are really well and whole? And this is it, because actually Christ came and he said, I have come that I can give you an abundant life. Now, I would like to, in fact, rephrase it and say that Christ has come and has given us what we call life to its fullest. Are you experiencing life to its fullest as young people? In fact, as young people, this is really the prime of your lives, wherein you are going to be bubbling with joy, so full of energy, so full of happiness. And I think you should also be happy because it is a privilege for you to be here at this university. Okay? And I pray that you are going to make the most out of it. And that's the reason why we are actually giving you this health tip so that it is going to help you. Okay? Now, joy to its maximum, but unfortunately, the devil is there to steal this wonderful joy that is intended for us. And we have to be very aware of this so that when it comes, we are not going to be deceived. Okay? We continue with what we call the sexually transmitted diseases, and now this is the cancers. And they are basically caused by a virus. You know, people think that viruses are small and that they are innocuous and they are not dangerous, but I tell you, one of the very dangerous, what we call organisms that is in the planet is really the virus. Can you imagine way back in 1918, wherein they call what we call the bird flu or the Spanish flu? That was caused by a virus, and it was transmitted by sneezing, by coughing, and droplet infection. Do you know how many people were killed in 1918? more than 50 million people that actually were killed because of this, what we call the Spanish flu. And in fact, the World Health Organization says it can happen again. And so they are very careful when there is going to be what we call an influenza, which seems to be what we call innocent. You're just going to say, anyway, it's flu, nothing to worry about. But really, it can, in fact, wipe entire populations. And so, aside from causing influenza, from rabies, from chickenpox, from mumps, it can also cause cancers, virus, okay? And let us see what are they, okay? Now, I don't know whether you have seen a person, of course, when you are darker, it's so difficult to see the yellowish tint in your skin. But still, in some people, it's because it is so serious that a person can become yellow, and also what we call the white part of the eye, which is the sclerae, becomes yellow. Now, depending on how the extent of hepatitis is, it is going to reveal in the yellowish discoloration of the white part of your eyes. Now, how do you get hepatitis B and C? These are actually transmitted by body fluids. And so many of these are actually because of sexual practices. You may not know it, you see, because a person is going to look nice and clean and beautiful, and yet he has or she has the virus. Now, oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, okay. Okay, sorry about that. The problem with hepatitis is that you are going to get it today. For instance, okay, you're going to have a sexual relationship with a person, and because you have what we call a small abrasion, then the virus goes into your system, and well, some people, they just feel a little bit sore throat, a little bit fever, and anyway, it's just flu. But some people, they become yellow. Now, many people actually do not become yellow immediately. About 2/3 of the people who have hepatitis do not get yellow. And that's the problem. Because now you don't think you have the virus, but really the virus is actually residing inside your body. Now, after you get that, even if you have yellowish discoloration, many people also recover. But it can be very dangerous because some people can actually die itself by hepatitis. But if you survive hepatitis, then if the virus continues to stay, there are some people who they're able to destroy the virus, so they recover. And that means that the virus is cleared from their system. But some people do not recover. And after 15 to 20 years, this is what's going to happen. This is going to produce hardening of the liver called cirrhosis. That means the normal structure of the liver has been replaced. Not only that, but see, this is how actually a healthy liver looks like. It looks smooth and soft, but then when cancer or cirrhosis steps in, that liver down there, you can see now, it has been replaced with what we call scarring and fibers, and it becomes hard, and it is not going to function. Remember, your liver is really the organ that clears, or it is the garbage of your body. There are two garbage systems of our bodies. One is the kidneys, that is for fluid. The other is the liver. So now, if you don't have anymore a garbage system in your body, what happens? All the dirt is going to accumulate inside your body. Not only that, but you're going to sweat, and the sweat is going to smell sometimes like feces. And also your breath is going to smell. So this is really the end stage of hepatitis. Hepatitis can lead, and it will take about between 15, 20, 25 years before this hepatitis is going to develop into cancer. Can you see? Now, that's a start of a liver cancer. The other parts of the liver are still all right, but now the cancer is starting to develop, and it's going to spread. And this is the end stage of cancer, wherein your abdomen is going to be distended, and there is going to be fluid. And when you are going to reach the stage, it's only a matter of 3 to 6 months, and you are going to die. But the good thing is that when you suspect that you have hepatitis, go immediately and see a doctor, and the doctor can actually give you medications that will prevent you from getting into liver cancer. But now, because they realize that you can actually help children if you inoculate, and even adults, so that when you can be exposed to hepatitis, it is not going to affect you. Vaccination is very important, and you need to have 3 doses of the vaccines. Day 0, or the first day. Then after 6 weeks, you get another dose. And 6 months after the first dose is another dose. And that is going to cover you for 5 years. And you have to repeat that every 5 years, 1 dose. So you are going to be constantly being what we call protected with the vaccination. Now, this is actually the cost, because there is really no cure for hepatitis B, but there is a cure for hepatitis C, and you can see what is the cost. The cost actually for hepatitis C, and that is to cure you, would be about $85,000. That is how expensive it is. Okay, the other thing is the human papillomavirus. I don't know what is your term here in Kenya about what we call these warts. You know, little growth that are still a little bit sharp. But that is the same virus that can cause cervical cancer. Now, ladies, do you know what is your cervix? Do you know what is the cervix, ladies? Or gentlemen? Well, gentlemen, you don't have any cervix, but women have cervix, eh? Remember that the womb where the baby is going to be implanted, and the womb has a mouth, and that is what we call the cervix, you see? Now, you can actually see here the first part that is normal. The second part there is now some growth of what we call cancer now. And you can see now the third one and the fourth one, these are already front stages of cancer. In fact, what happens is that it is going to look like cauliflower. When you are going to see the cervix, it appears like a cauliflower. And I've seen patients like that, and it's so sad because that is already far advanced. Now, what we would recommend for you ladies is actually to do what we call this pap smear. Pap smear is a way that you can actually diagnose. The doctor is going to insert an instrument inside your what we call female genitalia, and he is going to get a specimen, This is how it looks like. He's going to insert that speculum, and after that he is going to insert a little cotton bud and get a specimen, and it looks into the microscope. Generally, the recommendation for pap smear for women, as I said, is that when you have your first sex, I hope that's going to be after you get married, After you have your first sex, then 6 months after you should have your pap smear, because, you know, the papillomavirus can actually be obtained, number one, as a girl is going to play in the ground. And you know, sometimes these children, how they play, they actually just squat on the ground, and it can actually happen, see? Not only that, but also sometimes as the baby is going to pass through the birth canal, the mother, if she is infected with a virus, can give it to the children. That's why even in nuns who have not had sex, hopefully, are also going to have cervical cancer, but very, very what we call minimal. But really the biggest problem is when you have sex, because you see the men are more what we call resistant when it comes to the papillomavirus compared to the ladies. And so the man is going to give it to you, and yet he is all the rock, because even in men it can cause what we call penile cancer. But because the male organ is more resistant, it's not a big problem, So now, if you did not have any sex at all, then we don't recommend. But now, even today, they said, because, as I said, even nuns can have what we call cervical cancer. They recommend when a woman reaches 23 years old, then she should undergo a pap smear. Now, then you're going to say, am I going to be de-virginized now by an instrument? Well, you say, Doc, that's actually true, but you know, we are talking about practicality, because You might get cervical cancer and you don't know it. I know of some of my patients, they were about 28 years old. They had what we call cervical cancer. But because they were caught at an early stage, right now they're all right. But anyway, what you can do is you can actually say, Doc, okay, what you can do is you write a certificate that you have de-virginized me with this instrument. And they're going to do that. Okay? So if you have not had sex and were not married, 23 years old or 25 years old, then you should undergo what we call pap smear. Now, I know that it is quite embarrassing because you are going to open your legs, isn't it? In front of the doctor, isn't it? And I tell you, please, you might be as well a little bit embarrassed right now or feel ashamed rather than you are going to have cancer. I give this lecture so many times, and I remember there was a lady, she attended my lectures 2 or 3 times to do a pap smear. But do you think she ever went to have pap smear? Never. And so one day she came to the clinic and she was complaining of what we call joint pains. And I checked her and I said, there is something wrong with your blood. And the first thing that I thought was cervical cancer. I said, okay, did you have a pap smear before? She said, never had before, you see. And she was already about 46 years old. So I said, since you are a little bit embarrassed, can I please ask the nurse to do it? Okay, so the nurse came, and when the nurse actually reported to me, she was just so pale and ashen. I said, Doc, you better have a look. By this time, she allowed me now to look. And when I looked, she had already a cauliflower cervix. They did a hysterectomy, removal, and yet after that, in about a year's time, she died. So, okay, so this is it. They're going to look under the microscope. So I hope that you are just going to treat going to the doctor as though you are going to the dentist. Anyway, the dentist will tell you to open your mouth. Open your mouth, we'll see your mouth, okay? But when it comes to having pap smear, you're going to open your legs, isn't it? So just look at it as though you're seeing a dentist. In that way, you're not going to be embarrassed, okay? Now, these days, they have what we call vaccination. But this is given only to children, ladies who are 12 years old, because after that, we don't know what sexual activities you have. What we have heard about is that ladies here already, or men, already have sex at about 12 years old. I'm going to blush. That is really, your sexual organs are not yet mature. You're having already sex. And of course, it is not also according to the Bible. So we actually give to girls below 12 years old or the most 15 years old, 3, again, vaccines. But we are also going to give to boys. Why? It's because boys are going to sleep with the girls, isn't it? So even you're going to inoculate the girls, vaccinate the girls, but the boys have it, then they're going to give it again to the girls. Of course, when you have vaccination, it is going to give you what we call some protection. But it is not 100% protection. Okay? Now, okay, the second thing is that you have actually cancer of the tongue. Okay, you can see that one. It is the same virus that can cause penile cancers and also cervical cancer. I repeat, the same virus that caused this tongue cancer is the same specimen that comes from the cervix or from the male organ. So now you ask the question, how did a virus which is staying here can reach your mouth? What do you think? I don't know. You can be the one to deduce that. Okay. I myself, I'm embarrassed to say it. That's it, because you see, God made the mouth for eating, but some people are using it for something else. And that's what we call innovative sex these days, when in fact it is perverted sex, you see. Not only that, but it can also go into your throat. From the tongue, it can also go to your throat. Many people now are suffering from cancer of the throat. But please do not immediately jump to the conclusion, if you see a person who is suffering from throat cancer or tongue cancer, aha, this guy is doing some innovations when it comes to sex. Because you see, this can be caused also by smoking. This can also be caused by alcohol, you see. Okay, and also it can also be behind your rectum, you see. So why is it now the same virus which causes cervical cancer, penile cancer, is now into the rectum? Same thing. Okay. Now, Kaposi sarcoma, it is actually a tumor which can also be transmitted sexually. And what happens, you have those small blisters, and it also is in the legs. And as a result, it can bleed, and it can be also inside your system, and then it bleeds profusely, that you can have frequent anemia. Okay? So now those are what we call the sexually transmitted disease. I have not really discussed everything, but just to show you that really there is adequate proof when God says, thou shalt not commit adultery. Be faithful to your spouse. And if you are not yet married, abstain. Okay? But here is one of the biggest robbers of joy. It is actually HIV/AIDS. Here in Kenya, for instance, Kenya has one of the highest number of what we call HIV. I don't know here in the campus whether we have also students who have been infected, whatever, there is still hope. But the thing is that you have to remember that even though you have HIV, you can still live what we call a normal life because of medications. But we are not proposing that you get HIV. Okay? We are just giving you hope, you see, because sometimes people can be discouraged. But let us look into HIV because you see, HIV can result to debilitating diseases, wasting diseases, okay? Not only that, but it can be cause of premature death. Okay? I'm sure you have actually know people who have died of HIV. Why? It's because in the past there were no medications, but these days they have medications, and you actually find out that, okay, 50% of the new HIV infections in Kenya are with young people. Now, when we mean young people, it's between 15 to 29 years old. So that is your age. That's the reason why we're giving this, so that you can be careful not to be one of those victimized by HIV. And what is really one of the biggest reasons, because according to what they found out, if young people were just sleeping with young people, because young people are not infected, most of them are not yet infected, that is not going to happen. So what is the problem? The problem is actually what they call intergeneration sex activities. You understand what I'm saying? That is it, because you see, those people who are actually above you are the ones who have the virus. And when you are going to sleep with them, you are going to get the virus, and then you are going to sleep again with somebody of your age. And that is the problem that we are facing today. Really, most of the infection happened because young people were sleeping with older people. And what do you call that? Sugar mommies, isn't it? And sugar daddies, isn't it? And you become what we call a toy boy, isn't it? This is what in Kenya, this is 2016, 1.6 million people, about 6% of the population, about 100,000 new infections every year. 58,000 deaths. Can you believe it? 58,000 deaths, okay? Now, the mechanism of what we call HIV is, it attacks actually the CD4. Now, when we say CD, it does not mean that it is actually compact disc, as you know, isn't it? When we say CD, oh, compact disc, no. CD means cluster differentiation. These are white blood cells. They are the immune cells of your body. And the way that they clump together is how they are going to be labeled. You can have CD8, CD12, CD4. But what is important with this CD4, it is really what we call the orchestra director of the immune system. Meaning it is the one that is giving orders. Just like, for instance, if there is going to be war in Kenya, you have a general who is actually directing Air Force. You come and strike. Marines come and attack, you see. You should have one general who is going to give all the orders to orchestrate so that you are not going to be even killing each other. Okay? So that is CD4, and that is what it does. You see, there are so many what we call immune cells in the body, but it is the CD4 that gives the orders for all of these cells in the way that they are going to fight and respond to an infection. So here you have, this is actually the CD4. That blue picture there is the size of a CD4. And those red dots that you find out there is actually the virus. Now you can see that the virus is very small compared to the CD4. And yet, because they are so many, they are going to overwhelm the CD4. Okay? Now, as you can see, the virus enters, and then you can see some of those bulges there. That is when the babies are going to be made. Okay? Now, you have to realize that viral infection or HIV is just like those little deadly sins. You think, oh, it's just innocent, little drinking, little puffing, little marijuana, little abortion. But really, those little things are going to cause you destruction. Similarly with HIV. HIV is very, very small. And yet, it is going to overwhelm you. This is exactly what happens when you have actually an attack. An HIV is going to enter into your cells. First of all, it's going to attach. Okay? It has what we call a docking system. Okay? The docking system, once it actually are going to find and fit itself, then the virus is able to enter. Once it's able to enter, then it is going to shed its RNA and it becomes DNA, and the DNA is going to be incorporated into the nucleus, and as a result, it is going to produce babies or reproduce HIV virus. Now, this is the problem. So the CD4, which is intended to orchestrate all of what we call, is going now to become a manufacturing plant for the virus. Okay? So now, this CD4 is going to be hijacked. Instead of being what we call the originator, the orchestrator of your defense, it now becomes a manufacturing plant for the virus. And exactly this is what happened in America, wherein they used the airplane, wherein the airplane was hijacked, and when the airplane was hijacked, it was used as a bomb. It was supposed to be actually used as an airplane. Okay, sorry about this, you have to reboot again. Instead, now, as you know, in America, wherein the terrorists had used the airplane, and the airplane is now going to use as a bomb. Okay, that's it, okay? Can you see now that is actually the CD4, it is being overwhelmed by the virus, and the virus is going to make babies and babies. And now the CD4 becomes a manufacturing plant. And when that happens, next slide, the body now becomes actually like a garden, okay? Okay? Let me just see. It becomes like a garden wherein anything is going to grow because all sorts of germs are going to come out. And this is what's going to happen. So many diseases are going to come out. I'm having problems over here. But anyway, next slide, please. Okay, so it is known that there are about 36.9 million, but only about barely 50% or about 55% know that they are having the virus. So our plea with you is please have yourself tested, because you might appear to be normal and healthy and strong, but you might have the virus. Okay? Okay, so we advise, actually, next slide, voluntary testing. Okay. Having problems with my computer. Let me, this does that because okay, so we are advising you to have what we call testing. Next slide. Okay, you have to remember that HIV/AIDS is actually 95% by sex. The method of transmission is by sex. You can actually transmission by what we call other things like maternal childbirth, by breast, and by injection use, but that is very small compared to the general what we call infection, which is mainly because of sex. But of course, when we say sex, we do not mean that it is immoral, because some people get it by sex, like being raped. Now, this is very bad, because I know it is happening here in Africa, in South Africa, for instance. Every 23 seconds, a girl is actually raped. Every 23 seconds. I don't know here in Kenya. And we are actually advising, in case you are going to be, of course, boys too are going to be raped, I think. If this happens, then next slide, what we call post-exposure prophylaxis. Post-exposure prophylaxis, okay? And this is going to be given, next slide, to be given within 72 hours wherein they're going to give you medications so that this virus is not going to replicate and you are not going to be sick. It has to be given for 28 days. And so many people have been saved just by reminding. So in case you are going to get raped, I have actually several patients who got raped. One got raped, and because there was no what we call post-exposure prophylaxis, she got the disease. Okay. Also, some other ways that you can get it is by traditional surgery. You can see there, a person is being actually operated in the head. Okay, body art, isn't it? Because you want to have what we call maybe some nice drawings in your body, tattoos, and you are going to have also some etching into your skin. But I tell you, if they're not going to use the proper utensils, you can have big problems. I'm trying to see so that it will be okay. Oh, please. But anyway, okay, what we mean by revenge HIV, a person who is actually HIV is going to say, I'm not going to die alone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give it also to other people. It's either by sex, or if they are what we call medical personnel, they will get blood and put it into the vial, and whoever comes for injection, they will get that little amount and also inject it to you. This was actually in the newspapers in Zambia, you see. Okay, next slide. Well, also what we call female genital mutilation. And I know this is also practiced in Kenya because when I was practicing in Kendabe, I have seen ladies who have been mutilated and they are using what we call crude instrument. Next slide, please. Okay, those are actually the instruments that they use for doing what we call female genital mutilation. Next slide. Okay, one of the complications is tuberculosis. And you can have coughing, but you can have also tuberculosis in the eyes, in the brain, in the stomach, wherever it's going to be. Cryptococcus is a form of a meningitis, and people would just have a headache, and then all of a sudden they would fall down. Well, there are medications for that. Okay, next slide. And the reservoir for cryptococcus are actually chickens, roosters, and also what we call doves in birds. And as I said, this is the one that can go into your brain and you just have a headache and you can actually die. Okay, malaria, which we know, and the problem with this malaria, it can go into your brain. Next slide. Okay. And we are now developing what we call resistance. Okay. A lot of people are dying. These are the two causes actually of what we call death. Is number one, tuberculosis, and number two, malaria. Okay, next. Cerebral malaria. And of course, there are medications available like quinine. Next slide. Okay, pneumocystis carinii, wherein you are going to develop pneumonia. But there are medications. Thank God for that. Next. You have also candida, wherein there's going to be some whitish, cheesy-like material in your tongue, and it also goes into your throat, into your esophagus, that it is difficult for you to be able to eat. But it can also go to the next slide, please, into what we call your esophagus. Next slide. Into what we call the female tract, the female genital tract. Now, can you see? So, when you see that there is some whitish discharge, that shows that you have actually a candida infection. Next slide. Okay, there are medications, and these are the medications that you can put. Next slide. This is what we call herpes shingles or zoster, and this is very painful. This can happen into your buttocks, it can happen into your back, it can happen into your above the eyes, and you can see it can be very painful and it can also disturb your vision. Next slide. See, like this, for instance. If you are not going to be very careful, this is going to produce blindness. Next slide. But the bad thing about this is that it can also go into your brain and produce what we call encephalitis. Encephalitis means an infection of the brain. Those are the medications that you can get. Okay. Now, one of the things is that you can have actually diarrhea. The good thing is that there are actually medications for diarrhea. Give fluids, and that is going to help. Cytomegalovirus, another virus that can also go into your brain, and it can cause what we call several hepatitis, anemia, retinitis, encephalitis. Similarly with toxoplasmosis, both of these can actually cause blindness. Can cause blindness. Now, people who are actually having what we call HIV have a higher rate of developing heart attacks. We are beginning to see what we call People who have heart attacks at 30 years old, 35 years old, because when it causes an inflammation, then you become more liable to develop a heart attack. People who are actually 30, 35 years old and develop heart attack, it's mostly because they have HIV. And it can also, okay, that's heart attack there. And it can also go into what we call your brain producing what we call psychosis. You can have hallucinations, delusions of grandeur, because the virus can also go into your brain. Now, the good thing is that there is treatment available. But unfortunately, also it becomes complacency. People will say, anyway, there's a medication. If I get HIV, I can always get the medication, which is a bad attitude, really. Now, they what we call have test and treat, meaning once you are diagnosed with HIV, they immediately give you medications, okay? And that is to prevent what we call those complications that I have mentioned, plus also producing death. And many these days now have actually recovered. I myself have treated people who were at the point of death, but because of the medications, they are now back to work. Just an example, Luis. I will just show you. Can you see this guy, you see? He is already at the point of death, but because of medications, you can see he has rebounded. Similarly with his child. This child actually was born with HIV, but because of medications now looks very normal. And also with this ladies and also these men here. So in a way, medications have helped. Praise God for that. And to put it simply, it says, well, without the medications, people would have already died. Okay? But as I said, what we call negative effects is complacency. People will say, anyway, if I get HIV, let me have a good time. If I get HIV, I'm going to get medications. But do not be so confident, because how long will these free medications be available? The reason why we have free medications here in Kenya is because we have donor agencies who are giving, but if the donor agencies are going to be tired, then it's going to stop. We have problems now in Zimbabwe. People who are suffering from HIV don't have the regular medications. Similarly with Malawi. See? So please do not rely on that. The best thing is really to prevent. And of course, okay, donor funded, how long it's going to last. And of course, you have to realize, you see, there are also side effects with the medication. When you take medications, there are also side effects. And that includes what we call in the blood, in the liver, in the kidneys, okay? Now, how about condom use? Okay, so anyway, it's condoms. Well, I tell you, my friends, these days there is a term called what we call stealth condom. You know, some of these guys, what they do, they are going to wear condoms, but they actually put a hole. They even cut the tip, and you go, okay, I'm going to use condom on you. But then, that's the reason why they call stealth condom, because just like the stealth bomber, it can actually go to some places and it cannot be detected by the radar. And so it has been reported that several men are doing that. They pretend to be using condoms, and yet they have damaged the condoms, and they can spread the disease. So I tell you, my friends, the best way really is to follow God's command. And as I said, HIV is 95% sexual contact. AIDS, HIV is 100% preventable. So that means nobody here should get what we call HIV. And what is really the main strategy that we are going to use? As I said, okay, 100, when we say actually preventable, because now you can prevent from mother to child. You can prevent if you are going to have an accident or you're going to be raped. We give you what we call post-exposure prophylaxis. These days, blood transfusion has been really screened that it is not going to be contaminated. So really, HIV is 100% preventable. And I pray nobody is going to get it. And as I said, perhaps if some of you have it, you might as well get medications. And this is really the strategy that needs to be followed. Sex only within the sanctity of a monogamous, heterosexual marriage. Okay? Monogamous, not having 2 or 3 wives or 2 or 3 husbands. Okay? All the time, just one for a lifetime. No changing of partners. And it is going to be between male and female. And of course, it says here, okay, that is really the strategy you have to follow. And if you are not married, abstain from having sexual encounters and follow God's command. And it is said here in Proverbs 6:32, adultery, he that doeth it destroys his own soul. I pray that you are not going to destroy yourselves. You have such a very promising future ahead of you. And we don't want that to be destroyed by HIV or other diseases that is going to cause destruction later on. God has given us these guidelines so that we can live healthy and happy lives. And God doesn't want us to be sick. And I pray that all of us are going to be successful in this life at the same time healthy. Let us close in prayer. Dear Father, thank you for the opportunity that I have been given to be able to explain your plan for each of our lives, especially when it comes to intimacies and sexual relationships. Father, I have done my part, but it is only up to your Holy Spirit to convict these young people their need to really abandon any perverse or promiscuous lifestyle so that they may be preserved from all of these diseases. And I pray, Father, that you will keep them. Let your Holy Spirit work in their hearts. For those who are struggling against this pernicious habit of perverse sexual activity, promiscuous sexual activity, please give them the power to overcome. And I pray that you will keep them healthy and strong, and remember that you have a bright future for them, not only in this earth, also for the earth and the heaven to come. In Jesus' name, amen.